Welcome, folks, to Eye on the Illini. There's another big game up for Illinois this week. They are 6-3, nursing a two-game losing streak. They've went through a tough part of the schedule, and now they have Michigan State coming to town. And of course, we know what Michigan State did to a Illini team in 2022 that made a little bit of a downer on Illinois' finish as they went towards a bowl game. We have John Kirby, who is from the only podcast, which is the only podcast that you want to listen to if you want to know about Michigan State sports. And John, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Illinois, I got to be honest with you, they have struggled in November under Brett Bielema, not horribly, but they just haven't closed out seasons as well as what he would like. He's a very competitive man, and he was a master at closing out seasons in November when he was at Wisconsin. So there's a lot of pressure on the Illini to get up to 7 wins, and then they look at Rutgers and look at Northwestern, and they are the only team, ironically, in the Big Ten, other than the Big Four, who have a chance at 9 wins this season.
Sure.
But Michigan State has proven that when you least expect them to, they can bite pretty hard. Is there a lot to be worried about for Illini fans this weekend?
You know, I always look to see throughout the records, right? What does Vegas think? And, you know, right away you saw, I think it opened maybe Illinois 3.5. And I think that's probably fair when you look at, you strip away maybe the wins and losses, as I said, and you can kind of say that the level of the team on the field. I do think Illinois is a better team. That said, Michigan State has shown that they've had one of the more difficult schedules in the country, and they've had some blowout losses. I think there's been a lot that's been learned, and you can see them getting better through some of those blowout losses when they've played 3 top 10 teams this year. So they're not where they want to be at all. That said, I think taking on a program that's not in the top 10 is welcomed this week. That's for sure.
So Jonathan Smith has done what I thought is a pretty good job at Michigan State this year, especially considering the Tucker disaster that he inherited.
Yeah.
I know it's a 4-5 record, but am I looking at that properly, or what is the thoughts there in East Lansing?
I think he's exactly on track with where realistically people were hoping he would be at this exact point in the season. Certainly people wanted more out of last week. There was a little bit of, hey, are we figuring this out after an Iowa win at home, where the offense put together something we haven't really seen all season. And it was kind of like, is this them? Are they growing? Are they getting better? And then you saw a step back. So, you know, that's going to happen, I think, in the first year. That said, 6-6 was always probably the reach goal. They were 4.5 wins at the over-under at the beginning of the season. So tracking, like you said, you know, where you kind of want to be. And especially considering as you look from the future, when your quarterback is a freshman and he's still making freshman mistakes, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think a lot of people are getting to the point where you need to start seeing improvement. If you can make freshman mistakes, once you get to this part of the season, okay, what are we doing to eliminate the same problem that you've had, you know, game in and game out?
Yeah, it might be interesting to see Michigan State play Nebraska, to watch the battle of 2 very talented freshman quarterbacks. How much has Kurt Cignetti screwed up being a first-year coach for future Big Ten coaches?
Yeah, hat off to him. I mean, they looked efficient. They looked like they had an identity. So stuff that's really hard to do in year one. It helps when that identity and that execution is from a bunch of guys who are used to doing it. And it's just translated at this level with that he's coupled and complemented a very large group that came with him from James Madison. It's just hard to mimic. You know, Jonathan Smith, to his credit, tried to rally as many Oregon State guys as he could get. Same time, I think he knew there were only a handful that could probably play at the highest Big Ten level. So hats off to the James Madison guys, who I think must be, we're a step ahead, because here they are.
Yeah, and that playing together can't be underestimated. So maybe the top 5 down there at the next level, those teams might be targeted in mass by a team here or there, just to see if they can get a secondary or get a defensive line.
No doubt. It's worked. Case study of one, at least.
Yeah. So far, I have to admit that the Indiana fans are insufferable because their team is good. The last time they won the Big Ten was 1967. So that would be in the fall of 1967. So I would have been roughly 5 months old when that happened. They're a little bit too big for their britches for that, but I can totally understand their enthusiasm and excitement. The sense of entitlement's a little bit beyond me. Now, one question I have for you, since Michigan State has had the horrible luck of playing Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana, they only missed on Penn State this year.
Yeah.
Could you rank those teams in order? Who's the third, second, and best of those 3 teams?
That's tough. I think they all kind of handled Michigan State in their own way. Shockingly, Oregon is the one that made the most mistakes, I think. And I guess to their credit, when you win by the same amount and you're making mistakes like 2 red zone picks, to me, that actually tells me you might be the best team and you just weren't locked in. And, you got to create good habits. Don't get me wrong. But when the margin of victory is this nearly the same amongst all of them, and you just looked across and you're like, that's an NFL guy. Oh, that's an NFL guy. I think Indiana is sound as heck, but I think we saw Indiana versus Michigan this past week, where they were playing some level of athletes they hadn't seen yet on the line specifically. We'll talk about Michigan State's line in a bit. Not even close, and may have been one of the better ones that Indiana had seen. So it's going to get more difficult for Indiana. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but Oregon, to me, had the athletes. Ohio State, they are permanently in cruise control until the lights really come on. They can kind of coast with the talent that they have. So for me, it's all about how comfortable can they get Will Howard. And so I guess if I had to rank them right now, I do think Indiana is better than Ohio State.
Okay, so are you predicting that? Are they good enough to go into Columbus and beat the Buckeyes?
I don't know. I do know that Indiana is passing every one of its tests, and I don't think we can grade them lower just because of what they have in front of them. If they didn't beat Michigan by enough, or they didn't, whatever, it's like, okay, but they did. And it was during a thing they hadn't experienced before, being down, being in a tough situation. So you got to go through those things. Winning teams know that, and they do figure out a way to win, and they have. Ohio State has had a game where they could not figure out a way to win. We watched it against a team of equal, but I think as far as close as that one was at Oregon, you'll probably get a similar game in the horseshoe here with Indiana. So, and we all know home field advantage is just so big, in college football, and that's why we love it. So,
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that game. I did not think when I did my heat checks and Hail Mary, I do a column and a podcast. I did not think I would be writing that the Indiana-Ohio State game would be bigger than Ohio State and Michigan, but I don't think anybody else thought that at the beginning of the season either.
Oh, man. It's nice to have some parity, though, right?
Yeah, basically what Cignetti has proved is if you're a good coach and you can get the right players, you can turn around a team almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is Indiana is putting money into the NIL, both for football and basketball.
Yeah.
And if you want to play with the big dogs, you got to pick the right players. You also have to have a checkbook. You may not have 20 million that Ohio State has,
sure,
but you better have more than the 3 to 5 that Illinois has right now.
Yeah, it's a war chest off. It's an arms race, as we all know. And, coaching can get you pretty far, but at Jimmy's and Joe's, I mean, it's tough, right? So that's why, I think Ohio State might squeak it out against Indiana, despite Indiana maybe being the better team. Sometimes just athletes are better athletes. And so,
That's the way I'm leaning. Let's put our focus on this Saturday, Memorial Stadium, 1:30 p.m. Central Time on FS1. You have Michigan State brings that offense led by freshman quarterback up against the Illini. So for Illini fans, what are we looking at here? And maybe better start off with Childs first and then talk about the running game and the passing game and how this offense looks.
Sure, thanks. So Aiden Childs, every game, it is an adventure. Every drop back is an adventure. It can go extremely well and it can go extremely poorly. And sometimes they both happen on the same play. So it is exciting. I will say that it is exciting. It is stuff that he is learning in real time that I think a lot of people maybe who've been around football know. And the frustrating thing is that the people who've been around football know it because they've heard that lesson be taught dozens and hundreds of times. Don't throw across your body. Okay. He's still learning that. He might have heard it, but he's only heard it a couple times, every game in his life. We've heard it hundreds of times. And now he's experiencing what happens when you do those types of things. So he needs to figure out how to take the next step, eliminate the forcing it, eliminate trying to do too much and getting stripped, sacked. He just is a little too loosey-goosey with the ball. And when he does take care of it, they are able to put together wins against teams of the caliber of Iowa. So that's just it. It starts with him, and it helps to have a wide receiver like Nick Marsh, who is also a freshman and having probably quietly one of the better freshman seasons in the country. It's just that at Alabama and Ohio State, there happen to be two other guys that are doing the same but more. So Nick Marsh is, even when he was walked onto the field with Oregon and Ohio State, he fit in. And I think you might see here similarly, he has been giving teams a lot of problems.
Good. And when it comes to you talked about the line earlier in a reference to what Indiana had played. How is that offensive line for Michigan State?
It has not done a freshman quarterback any favors. I'll leave it at that, in the sense that they are, like all teams, going through injuries at the beginning of the year. They lost their right guard and then the backup right guard. And then, once you start to get down into those 8th and 9th offensive linemen and you're playing lineman shuffle, it's never ideal. And so you got that going on in front of a freshman quarterback who's trying to figure it out. And then a running game that can't seem to get any pop all year. And then all of a sudden figures it out against Iowa of all teams. So again, this team, like I mentioned, if nothing else, Saturday will be exciting. I promise you. It might be not beautifully exciting, but certainly entertaining.
Speaking of that running back core, what do the Illini need to be watching out for?
So they've been back and forth on who is the lead back, and I think they just haven't decided. Okay, so we're this far into the season, it's just a tandem situation. Nate Carter has been with the team for some time. He's, I guess you would call the first string back because he starts on the first drives, but I think they get about equal touches. And then he's a traditional back. We haven't seen him quite hit a home run yet this year. I mean, this is truly a Big Ten average running back. And then you have K'Ron Lynch-Adams, who is probably runs angrier than running backs I've seen in a while. Like he attacks forward. And that is something I think a lot of Michigan State fans appreciate. He's always a fall forward guy. So, between the two of them, they have to be able to create enough of a push, with offensive line to open up what Michigan State really wants to do, which is play action deep. They just love opening up and letting it rip, because then they just are letting Aiden Childs be an athlete. Just he can make all the throws, and it's just no thinking, fake, step into it. And then you can just tell, he's setting his body right, and you're like, this is going to go well. If he's not setting his body right, you might be in for one of his, I think, 13 interceptions on the season so far. So Illinois fans, like I said, be ready every pass play. It's going to go one of two ways on the extreme meter.
Yeah, Illinois is hoping for the pass rush to continue. They have made strides, and even played as well as you can be expected against teams like Oregon. When you look at the defense, what are they going to try to do to the Illini? It's got a couple really good wide receivers. They've discovered some threats at tight end as well, but the pass blocking has been inconsistent and the run blocking has been inconsistent, except really well during the Michigan game of all games.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So I think this is great news for Illinois fans. Michigan State hasn't had a sack on the quarterback since, I believe, September 21st. So that's 51 days ago, if you're listening.
Something's got to give because Illinois, I think, has yielded the most sacks in the Big Ten.
So there we go. Michigan State has been, because of they've been unable to really get after the quarterback in any way. It's been a contained type of situation, and the run defense has been sound. When you ask those linebackers to start defending in space is when Michigan State has some real problems. And teams, the best teams have, isolated those matchups and made plays. And sometimes you're just stuck, right? So if Illinois, they're going to try and take advantage of those linebackers who pretty solid run defense blockers. They fill gaps nicely. It's pretty sound. But athlete to athlete, that's where Illinois is going to probably need to make its hay, because the secondary has really stood up against some of the better wide receiving cores, despite some injuries. So if there's anywhere to look, probably the middle of the field.
Okay, that's interesting. Of course, Tanner Arkin has surprised people with his play this year. Cole Russ got hurt early on, started practice, and Illinois was very hopeful for a 6'5", 250-pound tight end who can run like the wind. And then we're going to wait next year for that, ACL willing. In terms of run stopping, how have they done against the run? That is where, to be real honest, it's a 6-3 team for Illinois, so I'm not complaining. But probably the biggest letdown as somebody following the team and looking at how players develop, I was anticipating the offensive line to be more accomplished in run blocking, and in particular, Illinois has struggled from guard to guard.
That's especially surprising considering the head coach and his entire thing, right? So I think on the flip side, the defensive line has been, from the run defense side, has been the biggest surprise. Right before the season started, and I mean right before, the starting two defensive tackles made business decisions and went to Miami and Oregon respectively.
So good decisions, right? I mean, both guys are doing okay.
They're doing well. And one, Derek Harmon at Oregon is going to be a first-round pick, or at least is projected to be now. So you immediately gut the defensive tackles, and you're kind of like, this is going to be a long year. And then the guys that stepped in kind of stepped up to a point where it was, average. This was holding up. And so when you have your expectations on the other end of it, it feels a lot better. So to answer your question, just kind of hold and serve is really what everyone was just like best case scenario. And they really, to their credit, have filled and just played very sound gap sound defense. And I think at this point, especially considering the athlete discrepancy sometimes on the opposite side, it's been welcomed, and it honestly makes you wonder, okay, what could this unit do, considering they're being coached up to a point of this level, if they got some of those guys that left or at that talent level. So again, might be an interesting point of this game here is what can break through us right there.
This is the run my own business dream. This is the colleges paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
When you look at the kicking game for the Spartans, both field goal, extra points, and from the punting side, how are they doing in that area, and what can Illinois expect there?
I just want to comment. this is the most Big Ten conversation of all time. We have to bring up special teams, and I love it. So great, from a field goal standpoint, you have Jonathan Kim. He can make every kick. And then we watched him miss a 21-yarder against our arch rival at the game after hitting 6 field goals, setting a record at Michigan State in one game. And so it's just, college kickers are going to college kicker, right? And, I think if you found a kicker that could, make 85%, you're in good spot. And that's where Michigan State is at. From a punting perspective, this guy is one of the best in the country. League, definitely. Country, potentially. Flips the field for Michigan State, which is huge considering the offense's struggles on time. From time to time. Regular 50-yard plus punts, averaging nearly 48 yards per punt on the season. So we know how important that is in this conference, considering, sometimes these things can turn into, slogs, and every yard counts. So from a special teams perspective, I think Michigan State is feeling pretty good in that area. But every Saturday, college kickers, man, you never know.
Yeah. How's the return game for the Spartans?
Non-existent. I mean, I think since, there's the rare occasion that you'll see Michigan State, once they got down a little bit in the bigger games against Oregon, Ohio State, maybe going against the data and trying to take it out, but it's not practiced enough. I don't think, especially when they default to just taking a fair and starting it out. So, I think it's almost unfair. I don't even know. I haven't seen it enough to tell you if it could be any good.
Do they have any trickery? Do they block punts? Do they do fake punts or anything like that?
Great question, because old Michigan State fans yearn for the days of Mark D'Antonio. And that was just a staple of his game plan. And it wasn't constant trick plays. It was just one nice, select, thoughtful wrinkle. Haven't seen too much of that from Jonathan Smith yet. And it doesn't mean it can't happen. We've seen an onside kick here and there, unexpected. But really you haven't seen anything go crazy. And part of me wonders is when an offense when you're trying to get the basics down so much, and then you're starting to ask freshmen to do, here's the razzle dazzle, and they're struggling with the basic concepts.
Yep.
It can get overwhelming. I'm not saying it can't happen, and maybe they do because they had a bye week, right? And so this would be the week, if you were going to do it, you had time. I would watch for that, but that only. But yeah, we haven't quite seen it in the way that Michigan State fans wish it was.
It's interesting timing for Illinois because both of these teams are coming off of tough runs. And to give Illinois fans, if you think Illinois, they had a tough schedule, but basically the bye week came perfectly for Michigan State after playing Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan, and Indiana.
Yeah.
Now, people thought the Michigan and the Indiana games probably would be flipped in terms of difficulty.
Yep.
And Iowa is not the Iowa of the last 3 or 4 years, but that is still a darn tough stretch that I would defy any team that go through that unscathed. And that includes the powerhouses down in the SEC. And Illinois coming off the 3 games of Michigan, Oregon, and then Minnesota, who was resurgent.
Right.
Until they forgot how to play football last weekend, but that's
right.
The college kids. So what do you see, John, in terms of a prediction on the game? How do you see it going, and who do you think is going to win? And do you have any indication of what the score might be?
I think in Illinois is coming off a week off as well.
Yes, they have a bye week, and they're trying to stop a 2-game skid to Minnesota and Oregon.
So, I think there's a lot riding on this game for both teams for different reasons, right? This is a team, like you mentioned, Illinois is looking at 9 wins and saying, we can do that. We can do that. And you got Michigan State saying, we got to get 2 more. We got to go bowling, in the sense that it's not about playing in the 6-6, being 6-6 and playing in a bowl game. And it's the extra practices. I mean, These guys need reps. And if we want to keep them around, right, it's a little column A, little column B. So they need the reps. So this is a game, 3 to go. You're running out of options. I don't want to say Michigan State's going to throw it all against the wall, but I think with that week off, you might see the opportunities to mix it up a little bit. Also saw after Michigan State's first bye, they came out and were able to run the ball extremely well against Iowa. A shocking thing to take place. And then it was just kind of took a step back against Indiana, as I mentioned. So to me, it's all dependent. Obviously, I mentioned Aiden Childs, but if the run game's a thing, then that changes everything. I would have Michigan State winning if the run game is able to walk out on the field and just look adequate. If that the usual Michigan State shows up, this might be a dogfight, and I would guess that Illinois would be wise to put them away when you have the time, because this is also a team that, as against Maryland, things got a little ugly, and then all of a sudden, boom, 80-yard touchdown pass to Nick Marsh, boom, 3 and out, boom, score. It can happen with these guys. It doesn't happen a lot, but they take their shots, and when they do hit, it's like, what happened? So I would say that I think Illinois, as I mentioned, if you can get it, you got to step on the throat, because these guys will not quit. And that's one thing that we appreciate about Jonathan Smith's team so far, is even in the tougher losses, they did not stop. They kept going. And so I would say, if there was a prediction, I would say probably in the fourth quarter, Illinois is going to have the lead. And there's going to be a time where Illinois can either put the game away, or Michigan State's going to have the ball with the chance to win the game, in a game that Illinois would look back on and say, that was dumb. We should have had that one. So that's where I'm kind of sitting today.
Yeah, Illinois doesn't quit either, but they also are not good at putting the boot on somebody and just kicking the bejesus out of them. These teams are so evenly matched. That's one of the things that I've talked about, is the fact that with NIL and the transfer portal, the middle of these big conferences really is very similar to the NFL. Any team can win on any week. And that's true. If you look at the Big Ten, 18 teams, 13 teams are between 4 and 6 wins this year.
Yeah.
So that is amazing. So you got Purdue, who's basically holding the door for everybody.
Right.
They may have been there first, but you shouldn't ever hold the door. And then, of course, you've got the Big Four teams on top. And then it's a basically shake it up and see what comes out every week.
That's right.
Now, we're going to take one quick thing here before we stop here. But I wanted to ask you a question. Illinois fans have not been fans of Tom Izzo since he stood up for Bruce Weber when Bruce Weber was let go, because they felt those two were such friends for so long, and Izzo did a pretty good job against Weber teams. They thought he was just defending the right for Michigan State to get a couple wins every year.
Got it.
And then with the Hatchet Man play that broke Io's nose, that Illinois might have went on quite further in the tournament, but he never really played as well with the mask after getting El Kabonged in the middle. Mm-hmm. So recently, Tom has been talking about his ability to pick his successor. Well, what exactly is he talking about, do you think? And how are Michigan State fans responding to that?
This is an interesting one, because this is one of the rare industries where if someone was doing really well, that they really could weigh in on who the next CEO is, right? You can have an opinion, but at the end of the day, there are a bunch of other people that are going to decide this and what's best for this company. And in this situation, Tom gets to say, well, maybe I do know what's best, because I'm the only thing that has made this place go since Magic Johnson. So everyone's got a good case here, right? And so I think the hope is that there's just an agreement that, everyone can work together and find what is best for Michigan State in an ever-evolving era. And so I think he mentioned, saying, I'm going to call up all my guys from different eras too, because I think one thing Tom has always understood, and to the detriment or to the anger of fans, that he hasn't attacked the new wave of college basketball as much as maybe some of his peers.
Right.
He acknowledges that he is of a different cloth, and he acknowledges that he has to learn this new thing, and that he's going to kind of fight it a little bit, because that's what ego-driven, guys who have been successful do. They had a way and it worked. So I think he's being smart in the sense that he's acknowledging that he might not have all the answers, but he is going to go talk to the guys who helped build this program with him and before him, and say, what is best, guys? You've been around the game in a lot of different areas. How do we attack this as a Spartan community? And I think that's probably a thoughtful way of going about it. And at the end of the day, how much sway will it have? Maybe if you make it a collaborative process with those big decision makers, it's the best case for everyone and no one gets upset, because even if it doesn't work out, at least we all agreed this was the way we wanted to go. So who knows, right? Who knows?
His coaching tree is not real good.
No.
Is there anybody on his coaching tree that could be a successor?
So I wouldn't even know if you could. It would be a distant branch, but the Drew Valentine, who was the brother of Denzel Valentine, is now the head coach at Loyola Chicago in the A-10. And he went there from a smaller league prior, Missouri Valley. And he, in year 2, won the A-10. And I mean, they were last place to first place. And he's recruited, I think he's landed 4 top 100 kids at Loyola. And it's just kind of like, this guy's young, he's in his late 30s. He's got a lot of energy. He seems to understand. He seems to get it, and is he ready for that next step? I don't think so, but certainly people are keeping an eye on a guy that just won the A-10. So he was a grad assistant at one point. As I mentioned, his brother was an All-American with the program. Yeah. So by default, we're claiming him a little bit. So that's
one last question. How many years would you guess until Tom retires?
Yeah, I would say 4. I mean, this guy still loves his job. As much as he looks angry and that he hates his job on game day, you can tell that in between that he genuinely enjoys trying to get the most out of a group of guys. Sometimes I wish our fan base wishes they were a group of guys that was a little higher caliber, or at least we took a shot at some higher caliber. But you know what? Tom's running back with a group he believes in. And, I think he cares more about that sometimes than anything else. It's doing it his way and with his guys. And he loves us against the world. And, who knows how far that'll take them, but he's happy. And what do you say to that? He's the boss.
Perfect. That was John Kirby, and he is from the only podcast that's on the Believe Network, BLEAV network. It's available at pretty much anywhere you have a big podcast distributor. You can find the only. So if you are interested in Michigan State, you want to get the best information, please go ahead, find him and subscribe, and then you can get the Eye on the Illini and then listen to the only right after it. John, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, I appreciate it, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. And if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd ask you to look at IlliniGuys.com, go there and subscribe. It's only 27 cents a day. $99 a year, exactly where we used to be. You have our stories ahead of time. You also have a message board where you can talk with the content providers, whether it's Brad Sturdy, Kedrick Prince, Matt Stevens, Larry Smith, myself, and you can talk to a cast of many Illini fans across the country and across the world in the message boards. We have found that as a group of fans, we can argue about anything from what's good pizza all the way to which Illini was the best point guard, etc. over the years. So there's tons of things that can be done on that page. We would really enjoy to have more people join our community. If you would like to join, go to IlliniGuys.com front page. You can register. You can go ahead and kick the tires for 6 days, and on the 7th day, you will get the bill, and we will have one more satisfied customer. And of course, if you enjoy this, you should be looking for our weekly radio show, the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. It's the only Illini-centric 2-hour weekly radio show in the state of Illinois, broadcast on over 20 stations. It comes out on either Friday or Saturday, depending on the station. If you go to IlliniGuys.com, hit the radio button, you can find what station near you it's on, what time, and you can tune right in. Feel free to do that, or you can go to IlliniGuys Sports Spectacular on your favorite podcast distributor and actually subscribe and get it right to your smartphone with no issues or effort on your part. And we also have our Big Ten show, Big Sports Radio, where we cover the whole Big Ten. We talk to insiders from across the conference. We try to get the big games and talk about them. And we have our weekly predictions, etc. That show is fun. And if you like shows that the people don't take themselves too seriously, we laugh a lot. We don't scream at coaches or players, and we don't do politics. You need a break from that stuff. Please download us, enjoy us, tune in the radio. Either way, we are here to entertain. With that, folks, we will be back later in the week. It looks like a big one with Illini basketball on Wednesday night and, of course, the football game on Saturday. Until then, go Illini.